I'd been walking for hours, the cold wind whipping through my hair as I wandered aimlessly through the city streets. It was as if I was trying to escape my own thoughts, but they just followed me, haunting me like a ghost. I had lost everything: my job, my relationships, my home. It felt like the whole world had been ripped out from under my feet, leaving me with nothing but a deep sense of emptiness and despair. As I walked, the city seemed to stretch out before me like a desolate landscape. The towering skyscrapers and bustling streets that had once filled me with excitement and energy now seemed cold and unforgiving. The people rushing to and fro appeared to be in a different world, one that I could no longer inhabit. I felt like a ghost drifting through the crowds, invisible and insignificant. I thought back to how it had all started to unravel. I had been working at a job I loved, but the company had downsized and I was let go. I had thought it wouldn't be a big deal, that I would easily find another job, but months went by and I found myself struggling to make ends meet. My relationships had begun to fray, my friends and family growing tired of my constant negativity and frustration. And then, the final blow: I had lost my home, forced to move out of the apartment I had lived in for years. As I walked, the memories swirled through my mind like a toxic stew. I felt like I was drowning in my own failures, unable to catch a breath. I had never felt so alone, so adrift in the world. It was as if I had hit rock bottom, and I didn't know how to climb back up. The thought sent a wave of panic through me, and I quickened my pace, trying to outrun the despair that was chasing me. But as I turned a corner, I caught sight of myself in a store window reflection. I was shocked by the person staring back at me, gaunt, hollow-eyed, and haunted. I looked like a shadow of my former self, a mere specter of the person I used to be. It was a wake-up call, a harsh reminder of just how far I had fallen. And as I stood there, frozen in shock, I couldn't help but wonder, could things get any worse? Little did I know, my life was on the verge of taking a dramatic turn, one that would change everything forever. I was sitting on a bench in a local park, surrounded by the vibrant sounds of nature, but my mind was elsewhere. The warm sun was shining down on me, casting a gentle glow over the entire scene. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of emptiness that had been following me for weeks. The park was bustling with people, children laughing and playing tag, couples strolling hand in hand, but I felt completely alone. The smell of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers filled the air, but it did little to lift my spirits. After hitting rock bottom, I had been left feeling hopeless and alone, like I had lost all sense of direction and purpose. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I noticed a figure approaching me. It was a stranger, dressed in casual clothes, with a friendly smile on his face. He looked like he was in his mid-30s, with a rugged beard and piercing brown eyes that seemed to see right through me. At first, I was skeptical, wondering what this person wanted from me. I had been disappointed by so many people in my life, and I didn't know if I was ready to open up to someone new. But there was something about him that put me at ease, something that made me feel like he genuinely cared. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, nodding towards the empty space on the bench beside me. His voice was deep and soothing, with a hint of a gentle accent that I couldn't quite place. I shrugged, feeling a bit awkward, but he took it as a sign to sit down anyway. We sat there in silence for a moment, watching the world go by, before he turned to me and started talking. "My name is Max, by the way," he said, extending his hand for me to shake. I took it, feeling a firm grip, and introduced myself. As we started talking, I found myself opening up to him in ways I never thought possible. He asked me questions about my life, about what had brought me to this place, and I found myself sharing stories and feelings that I had never shared with anyone before. The words poured out of me like water from a dam, and I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders as I spoke. Max listened intently, his eyes locked on mine, his face filled with empathy and understanding. He didn't try to offer any solutions or advice, he just listened, and that meant the world to me. At some point, Max shared a personal story of his own, one that resonated deeply with me. He told me about a time in his life when he had felt lost and alone, just like I did, and how a stranger had reached out to him and changed his life forever. His story was one of struggle and redemption, of finding hope in the darkest of places, and it struck a chord deep within me. I felt a sense of connection to him that I couldn't explain, like we were two souls who had been through similar struggles and had come out the other side. As we talked, the park around us began to fade into the background, and all that was left was the two of us, suspended in this moment of connection. I felt a sense of wonder, of awe, at the fact that this stranger had shown up in my life and was sharing his story with me. And as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't help but wonder what had motivated him to reach out to me, to share his story with me, and to listen to mine. What was it about him that made him care so deeply about the well-being of a complete stranger? I felt a spark of curiosity ignite within me, and I knew that I wanted to know more about this mysterious person who had stumbled into my life. I'll never forget the day that stranger showed up at my doorstep, offering me a lifeline when I thought all was lost. It was as if the universe had finally decided to cut me some slack, sending someone to help me pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The stranger's personal story, which they had shared with me just a day before, still resonated deeply within me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt seen and heard, like someone actually understood the depths of my struggles. As we sat in my dimly lit, cluttered apartment, the stranger looked around at the remnants of my failed life and then back at me with a piercing gaze. "You don't have to stay here," they said, their voice filled with a conviction that made me believe they truly cared. "I have a place you can stay, a chance for you to get back on your feet." I was taken aback by the offer, unsure of what to make of it. Why would this complete stranger, who had just shared their own story of struggle and redemption, want to help me? I was hesitant at first, my defenses still up from all the times I'd been let down in the past. But there was something about the stranger's words, about the sincerity in their eyes, that made me consider their offer. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was just the exhaustion of carrying my burdens alone, but I found myself nodding in agreement. "Okay," I said, the word barely above a whisper. The stranger smiled, a warm, genuine smile, and helped me gather what little I had left. We left my apartment behind, stepping out into a world that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. The stranger's home was a cozy, welcoming place, filled with the smell of fresh-baked bread and the sound of laughter. It was a world away from the cold, dark apartment I had been living in, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But it was what came next that would change everything. The stranger took me to a community center, a place bustling with people from all walks of life, each with their own story of struggle and triumph. As I was introduced to this community of supportive people, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never experienced before. They were a diverse group, united by their determination to help one another through the tough times. There was Sarah, who had lost her job but found a new passion in volunteering. Jake, who had overcome addiction and was now helping others do the same. And Maria, who had faced discrimination but had found solace in this community of like-minded individuals. As I listened to their stories, as I saw the genuine care and support they offered one another, I began to realize the power of community and support in overcoming adversity. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself, something that could help me heal and grow. The stranger's offer had been more than just a place to stay. It had been a doorway to a new way of living, one where I didn't have to face my demons alone. As I looked around at these people who had become my lifeline in a matter of days, I knew that I still had a long way to go. The demons that had led to my downfall were still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. But with this community by my side, I felt a sense of courage that I had never felt before. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that I was no longer alone. I'd been living in this small town for a few weeks now, and it was starting to feel like home. The stranger who had shown up out of nowhere had become a close friend, and the community had welcomed me with open arms. I'd started to feel a sense of belonging, like I was finally a part of something bigger than myself. But despite all the progress I'd made, I knew I still had a long way to go. I had to face my past and all the mistakes I'd made. It wasn't easy, but I started to open up to the stranger and the community about my struggles. I told them about the mistakes I'd made, the people I'd hurt, and the opportunities I'd wasted. It was hard to admit all of this, but I knew it was necessary. I had to confront my past if I wanted to move forward. The stranger and the community listened with kind and compassionate ears, offering words of encouragement and support. They reminded me that everyone makes mistakes, and that it's never too late to learn from them and start anew. As I shared my story, I started to see a way forward. I realized that I didn't have to be defined by my past mistakes. I could use them as lessons and start to make amends. I started to think about all the things I could do to make things right, to prove to myself and others that I was committed to change. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined. I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way and to work towards a brighter future. The community's support meant everything to me. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me and wanted to help. They offered to help me make amends, to support me as I worked towards redemption. I was grateful for their help, and I knew that I could count on them to be there for me every step of the way. With their support, I felt like I could finally start to heal, to move forward and leave my past behind. But just as things were starting to look up, I faced a new challenge that would test my resolve and commitment to change. I'd been making progress, slowly but surely, and it felt like a weight was finally lifting off my shoulders. The stranger, who had become like a mentor to me, had been guiding me through the tough times, and the community had been a constant source of support. But as I stood at this crossroads, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I had a decision to make, one that could potentially impact my future in a big way. The stranger sat with me, sipping coffee and talking me through my options. "You have to think about what's best for you," they said, their voice calm and reassuring. "Not what's best for everyone else, but what's best for you." I nodded, taking their words to heart. It was easy to get caught up in trying to please others, but at the end of the day, I had to make a choice that aligned with my own values and goals. As I weighed the pros and cons, I felt like I was torn in two different directions. On the one hand, I had the opportunity to take a safe route, one that would guarantee me a certain level of comfort and security. But on the other hand, I had the chance to take a risk, to pursue something that truly excited me, even if it meant facing uncertainty and potential failure. The community was divided on the issue, with some people urging me to play it safe and others encouraging me to take the leap. I appreciated their input, but at the end of the day, I knew I had to make this decision for myself. I thought back to all the times I'd played it safe, only to end up feeling unfulfilled and restless. I thought about the stranger's words, about how growth and progress often require difficult decisions and trade-offs. As I sat there trying to make up my mind, I felt a sense of trepidation. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I failed? But the stranger's words kept echoing in my mind, reminding me that I had the power to create my own destiny. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. I was ready to make my decision, no matter how scary it seemed. Little did I know, the consequences of my choice would be more far-reaching than I could have ever imagined. I'll never forget the day I realized that my decision had set off a chain reaction of events that would change my life forever. It was as if I had been living in a dream world, and suddenly I was slapped back into reality. The consequences of my choice were harsh, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. At first, it seemed like everything was falling apart. I had to deal with the fallout of my decision, and it was a heavy burden to carry. There were times when I felt like giving up, like the weight of my mistakes was too much to bear. But then I remembered the words of the stranger who had shown up in my life out of nowhere. They had told me that I was strong, that I could get through anything as long as I had the right mindset. The stranger and the community continued to be a source of support and guidance for me. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me and wanted to help. They encouraged me to learn from my mistakes, to use them as an opportunity for growth and self-improvement. And slowly but surely, I started to see that they were right. I began to adapt to my new circumstances, to find ways to overcome the obstacles that stood in my way. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to make it work. I learned to be resilient, to bounce back from setbacks and keep moving forward. And as I did, I started to notice something amazing. I was becoming stronger, more capable, and more confident with each passing day. The importance of resilience and adaptability hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that life was full of uncertainties, that things wouldn't always go as planned. But it was how I responded to those uncertainties that mattered. I could let them break me, or I could use them as an opportunity to learn and grow. And I chose the latter. As I navigated the consequences of my choice, I started to see a glimpse of a brighter future. It was like a light at the end of a tunnel, a beacon of hope that guided me forward. I knew that I still had a long way to go, that there would be more challenges and setbacks along the way. But I was ready. I was ready to face whatever came my way, armed with the knowledge that I was strong, capable, and resilient. And with that knowledge, I knew that I could overcome anything. I still remember the day I hit rock bottom like it was yesterday. I had lost everything that mattered to me, my home, my family, my sense of purpose. I was wandering aimlessly, feeling like I was just a ghost drifting through life. But then something changed. A stranger showed up out of nowhere and everything started to shift. At first, it was just small things. They'd bring me food or offer to listen to me vent about my problems. But over time, their support and guidance started to add up. They introduced me to this amazing community of people who had been through similar struggles, and they all just welcomed me with open arms. It was like I had finally found a place where I belonged. As I started to adapt and learn from my experiences, I began to see a way forward. I realized that I didn't have to be defined by my past mistakes, that I could create a new future for myself. The stranger and the community were always there to offer support and guidance, pushing me to be my best self. They'd encourage me to take risks, to try new things, and to believe in myself. I started to make plans for my future, to take steps towards my goals. It was scary, but it was also exhilarating. I felt like I was finally alive, like I was waking up from a long, dark dream. The idea that the future is full of possibilities and potential started to sink in, and it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to be held back by my fears and doubts anymore. As I looked around at the people who had become like a family to me, I felt a sense of gratitude and wonder. How had I gotten so lucky? How had I found these amazing people who cared about me, who wanted to help me succeed? I knew that I couldn't take their support for granted, that I had to make the most of this opportunity. So, I started to work harder than I ever had before to pursue my passions and make my dreams a reality. But even as I was building this new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all temporary, that the stranger and the community could leave at any moment, and I'd be back to where I started. It was a scary thought, one that kept me up at night. What would I do if they left? How would I cope without their support and guidance? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the present moment, but I knew that eventually I'd have to face this possibility head-on. I still remember the day I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, with the stranger's words echoing in my mind. It was as if I had been given a second chance, a fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. The community that had rallied around me, providing support and guidance, had become like a family, and the thought of losing their presence in my life was daunting. But I knew that I had to come to terms with the possibility and learn to stand on my own 2 feet. As I sat in the small cafe, sipping a warm cup of coffee, I felt a sense of nostalgia wash over me. The stranger who had been my rock, my confidant, and my guide was about to leave. I had grown accustomed to their presence, and the thought of them not being around was almost too much to bear. But I knew that I had to be strong for myself and for the people who had believed in me. The stranger walked in, their eyes scanning the room until they spotted me. They smiled, and I felt a lump form in my throat. We had been through so much together, and I knew that I would never forget the lessons they had taught me. They sat down across from me and took my hands in theirs. "You're ready," they said, their voice filled with conviction. "You've grown so much, and you're capable of achieving great things. Don't be afraid to take risks, and don't be afraid to fail. It's all part of the journey." I felt a tear roll down my cheek as I looked at the stranger. They had given me so much, and I didn't know how to repay them. But they just smiled and squeezed my hands. "You don't owe me anything," they said. "You just owe yourself the chance to live the life you deserve. Remember, growth and progress require embracing uncertainty and taking risks. Don't be afraid to step into the unknown, because that's where the real magic happens." The community gathered around us, each person sharing their own words of wisdom and encouragement. They told me to stay strong, to stay focused, and to never give up on my dreams. They reminded me that I was capable, that I was loved, and that I was enough. As I listened to their words, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I was ready. I was ready to embark on a new journey, armed with the lessons and insights I had gained from my experience. As I stood up and hugged the stranger and the community, I felt a sense of gratitude. They had changed my life in ways that I could never have imagined. They had shown me that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. And they had given me the courage to take the first step into a brighter, more uncertain future. I took a deep breath and smiled, knowing that I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The stranger's words echoed in my mind. "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." I knew that I would rise, that I would keep moving forward, no matter what. And as I walked out of the cafe into the bright sunlight, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. I was ready to start a new chapter, a new beginning, and I knew that nothing could stop me now.